Hello, ladies and gentlemen, and welcome to today's BOC Group webinar. Thank you all for joining us. The topic today is strategic process management and customer journeys, cooperation models, and classic company maps. First, some due diligence. If you have all your settings configured right, you should be hearing me loud and clear. All the settings are in the GoToWebinar panel on the right side of your screen. In that area, you can also ask questions should you have them during the presentation. We will try to answer them at the end, but if we do not have time, feel free to ask your questions anyway, and we will send you an answer afterward by email. As a participant of this webinar, you are of course anonymous to other participants. We are recording this for the sake of we can send it to you in the future. My name is Marin Tigvica. I am your host today. And I hope you feel quite comfortable in our virtual meeting room. As an expert on the topic that we'll be talking about today, I have joining me Tom Brennan. He will be presenting the content-related part of this webinar. Some highlights and focus to begin with. Today we will be showing you the possibilities of enabling fundamental organization and innovation in process organization and more. We will also cover the following: how to create customer journeys, how can cooperation models be used in workshops or for documentation, and how to question interactions within business models or reshape your process maps in terms of your target operating model. So beforehand, here's a brief overview of the activities of the BOC Group. The BOC Group was founded in 1995 as a spin-off of the University of Vienna, and today has over 230 employees in 8 different countries. We sell our products, implementation projects, and consulting services in more than 50 of those countries, and building on the support of a strong partner network. We are particularly proud that nearly 100,000 active users of our free community editions have registered worldwide. With this proliferation and experience of more than 20 years in IT-based management domains, we now have more than 35,000 installations of our commercial software products in companies all around the world. Our products from what we call the BOC Management Office are primarily aimed at facilitating changes in business and IT. We accomplish this by creating the necessary visibility into your process architecture or enterprise architecture that helps you better understand and control the change that occurs. The portfolio of our products includes the well-known Adonis for business process management, analysis and optimization. Then we have AdoIT here on the right for IT management and enterprise architecture management, and of course GRC for governance, risk, and compliance. All of these products conceal a powerful common platform that allows tool users to model processes and architectures, create analytics and reports, assess risks, and more, all through a web-based approach. This platform is characterized by very high flexibility in the configuration and also allows implementation of very specific customer requirements in customizing should that become necessity. The BOC Group does not leave you alone with the exciting challenges of the digital transformation, even beyond our products, and therefore we offer specialist advice, training, and support, everything from a single source, so to speak. If you're interested in our portfolio, feel free to contact us directly or visit our website for more details at www.boc-group.com. Our international customers, but also renowned analysts such as Forrester or Gartner, have become increasingly aware of us in recent years and are a positive testimony to the developments we have made to date, but also to our future plans. Please take a few minutes and browse through the respective reviews and reports on our website. Now, I won't stretch this any longer than it needs to be. Tom Brennan is already prepared and will guide you through the topic strategic process management, and I will hand over to Tom.
Okay, thank you, Marin, for the introduction. I would also like to extend a warm welcome to all of our participants today. As Marin mentioned, we're going to talk about strategic process management, and in essence, strategic planning is a management methodology to try and understand your environment in which you do business and to try and establish the direction your organization needs to go for success in the future. So your business processes play an essential role in this methodology in both contributing to but also achieving your defined business goals. And we just need to understand how each process adds value right the way across the value chain, whether that's product or service based. So there's many different ways to represent your business processes from a high level strategic perspective. And today we're going to look at some of the approaches that we can follow, as mentioned here, from customer journeys, cooperation models, and our more classical process maps. So what can you expect from today's webinar? Well, we're going to begin by talking about some of the background and motivation for strategic process management and how digitalization is having an impact on our enterprise assets. We'll then discuss in more detail the three methods we've mentioned and the approaches for strategically documenting your business processes using our customer journeys, the cooperation models, and our more hierarchical process landscapes or process maps. So I'd like to start with some background and motivation, first of all, for strategic process management. We've got many external factors that can influence any enterprise that is trying to grow and improve, that are all part of an ecosystem, but that are all in some way also related. There is always a constant drive for change, especially in recent years with the need for digital transformation. You're always going to have competition and market pressures, while at the same time you must continue to operate and maintain the standards that your customers have come to expect, in addition to constantly being innovative while trying to keep your costs down and increasing your revenues. So all of the various factors that we have here influence the basic foundations of every company or organization. So if we look at this from a different perspective, here we have the BPMS paradigm, which was defined in 1994 by the Professor Karagiannis from BOC, outlining the four core components of any company as well as their interactions. So from the products or services that you have on offer, the business processes that deliver the products that you provide to your customers, to the stakeholders and the organization who are dependent on your processes, and then the information technology that the processes are implemented with, which also will have a very strong influence on the process design. So each component here can also be defined as a differentiator when it comes to competitive advantage over your competitors. So features of your IT and the IT skills that are available in your company will naturally have an impact on the employees and customers who will be supported differently. It will affect new or changed products and services, as well as the processes that can ultimately be configured and supported in different ways based on the IT. By comparison, we also need to consider how a change in our product or service portfolio is going to influence our processes, our IT, and our stakeholders. We know already that redesigning our processes is going to greatly affect the stakeholders' work and the IT systems that actually support the business processes. So why is it so important for me to explicitly point this out? So we are already convinced that many companies have had some dealings with digital transformation and understand that digital transformation not only brings with it some kind of hardships and undeniable risks, but it also opens up some new and interesting opportunities. So where a few years ago our products and services were considered separate to each other, the growing service industry has now helped to bring both worlds closer together, which finally kind of ends up or culminates for the time being with what we call smart products or more smart offerings. So if you consider the disruptive market change that the introduction of car-to-go had maybe on the taxi industry, for example, meaning that you don't need to own your own car, but you can use the car-to-go service as your own taxi service essentially. And then being a smart offering, you can quickly check on your mobile phone if an available car is parked nearby. Now, we assume also that companies have already been dealing with such new opportunities because of the developments in their own environment. However, significantly fewer companies know what impact the changes are having on their enterprise assets. So here we have the BPMS paradigm again, but if we now switch that to a more kind of modeling perspective, we can use the modeling objects, as modeling helps to better understand the overall context of your enterprise assets. So in other words, it's basically the blueprint for your business. And so here, yeah, we've converted the BPMS paradigm into the modeling objects. You can begin to model your products, your processes, your applications, and your organization or working environment. And by connecting the assets, you begin to document your business knowledge. So by evaluating all of your assets, you either make implicit knowledge explicit, or you even gain some new knowledge that you weren't maybe aware of before the documentation process. So in this abstract representation here of the meta model of Adonis, with classes such as documents and roles and risks and interfaces, and even our projects and initiatives, here the benefits can become quite clear. So we have learned in a variety of products that this kind of internal networking between stakeholders and collaboration between maybe the product and risk manager, or the process responsible, or even the application owner from the IT side, is really the key to successful transformation projects. But it also creates more transparency and really kind of problem-free or friction-free communication, as well as the clear responsibilities that can be defined, so every stakeholder knows their role. Another critical success factor for transformation is having an understanding of both your business and your technical architecture. So we find that companies who do strive for this will have a better chance of success in the medium term. But the question still remains, what models do we need, and how should we best represent everything that we would like to model? So it may kind of come as a shock to hear from a BOC consultant, but it does not always have to be a process model. Over the years, there's been a variety of various modeling approaches and standards developed, discarded, reinvented, and they're still being revised even to this day. So we have to ask the question, what's the right approach to use? So for the documentation and analysis of the different assets I mentioned earlier in the Adonis meta model, there are different methods and approaches and various models that are suitable. But today, at least here, you can see an overview of the various models available, which touch on the different elements within our abstract meta model in Adonis. But from a more strategic perspective, and in terms of the business models and approaches we're going to focus on today, here we can see them highlighted as customer journey mapping, our cooperation models, and the process maps, which is an already kind of a sustainable and a more proven approach. But as you can see, we're only touching on a very small part of the meta model of all of the enterprise assets that are available in Adonis when we are only talking about strategic process management. So let's now look at some of these approaches in more detail. First of all, we have the customer journeys, which help you to understand the customer's life cycle. We try and identify and evaluate all of the interaction points, and ultimately try and optimize the customer's experience. So with the second approach here, our cooperation models, we're trying to get a better understanding of the interactions between the stakeholders. We can then plan for and try and have some control on the interactions between the stakeholders, and in the end try and derive the actual process structure based on the various phases that occur during the different interactions as a result. And then the most common approach is the typical process maps that are used to develop the more internal view of the process landscape, where we're kind of striving for standardization and to try and reuse the models as much as possible. And lastly, we can define our responsibilities and the different boundaries that we have for more kind of governance and organizational purposes. And lastly, just down the bottom, for a more operational view, we then get into the detailed business process flows as the kind of basis towards process execution and continuous improvement. So firstly, I would like to highlight the kind of purpose and background of customer journey modeling or customer journey mapping. And the purpose of the customer journey map is to try and understand all of the interactions that a customer has with a company, but it's more from the customer's point of view. We can then identify and evaluate the points of interaction or the various touch points to see if they are either pain points or actual wins for the company, so we know we're on the right track. But before we do, we need to analyze the customer experience based on the touch points that they have, and then improve the touch points with more targeted initiatives once we've performed our analysis. But the customer journey is really based on the kind of design or the overall picture of the customer's experience. And the customer experience is the kind of more subjective perception and feedback that you receive from customers whenever they have either direct or indirect contact with a company. So the challenges here are first of all to be aware of the customer journey and trying to understand the customer experience, as well as trying to optimize the customer journey and experience based on your products, organization structure, business processes, and IT, as we mentioned back with the BPMS paradigm. So what are the components of a customer journey? So at the top level, the customer journey is described by stages, and the stages are the various phases of the journey. From here we have discovery, explore, buy, all the way to hopefully a continuous engagement with your customer. Each stage or each phase here is broken down into individual steps, and then the touch points are based on the system or human interaction that are used for each step. Once the touch points are identified, we can then perform a customer experience assessment on the touch points that we have identified. For example, surveys could be used maybe to carry out an assessment, and based on the analysis of the assessment results, you can figure out the pains and gains. So here we have our plus and minuses associated with every touch point that we discovered to try and determine what either vulnerabilities exist, but also where competitive advantage lies based on more positive customer experience results. And we can also document other elements like the stakeholders involved or the data and the systems used. But let's now look just at a couple of more kind of concrete examples away from this more theoretical view on the customer journey. So here we have two examples of customer journeys created in Adonis. One is an end-to-end process based on the customer lifecycle, and the other one is a more tailored to just a specific customer interaction. So during the end-to-end process development, the priority of the workshop was to create transparency regarding all of the customer interactions that we had during the life cycle of a customer. Some questions that were raised during the workshops were which steps does a typical customer go through during their life cycle? And the second question was what touch points and information are needed at each step along the way? And the third question was what divisions and departments were involved. So as a result of the workshop, we were able to state in Adonis which touch points we had and which ones were performing well and which ones were doing not so well. We could identify which touch points were missing, and also where the strengths or the gains and the weaknesses, or what we would call the pains, actually lie. And we also realized that some business units never really understood themselves to be such an important part of the customer's journey or the customer experience until we actually went through this exercise. And the final step was to document a collection of possible initiatives or projects to improve the customer's journey as a whole. In a completely different project, we were invited to support the detailed analysis of just a single, more specific customer interaction in the customer's journey. The overall objective here was to find out how many interactions were needed and how many different contact people are involved within the company, but also to see how those interactions aligned with the internal business processes. So as a result, here we could see the process really from a customer's point of view. So we were viewing it from the customer's activities here. We could see who was involved, so what actors or roles were involved throughout the journey, and could document them here on the model. We could see our interaction points or touch points, such as any kind of calls or emails that were required between the customer and the involved actors. We then were able to define KPIs for measuring individual aspects during the process, but we could also see what processes were affected from a more business perspective, i.e. the front or back office processes that we had. And here we could also highlight some milestones along the way as well. So as you can already see from in this focused area of one specific customer interaction, as well as in the choice of notation for the representation of the customer journey from start to finish, you are really very kind of unrestricted in Adonis based on the meta model and the objects that we have available in Adonis as well. But the two approaches from the full customer journey to a more specific interaction are quite similar in that the common denominator here in this form of analysis helps you to identify specific kind of actions and initiatives that will help you to optimize both your customer journey, which in turn you would hope has an impact on the customer experience as well, to try and remove any of the problems or any of the pain points that you've discovered along the way through more targeted initiatives to improve your perception from the customer. Okay, so that's the end of the customer journey for now. So the next topic I would like to talk about is the cooperation model, which have a slightly different purpose compared to the customer journey. So the purpose of the cooperation model is to try and identify and visualize the interactions between different actors involved at a more kind of high-level presentation. The cooperation model is also a great idea generation tool, and it can then therefore be used to try and convince management or the board members with a more simplified presentation of what could be a complex target process, just to see who's involved before actually moving towards the more detailed business process view. But the background for the cooperation model is that you really must understand the interactions that the various actors involved are having to know what's going on before you can try and have any influence on the interactions to improve the process from start to finish. Classic kind of process mapping practices can lead to what we call process framing, which really prevents any outside the box kind of thinking and restricts the more free-form brainstorming that can go on during a kind of a workshop environment, for example. So let's now take a look at what the cooperation models actually look like. Here we can see what they consist of. So they consist of the actors and their interaction elements. So they are rather simple and therefore easy to interpret. So hence the fact they're kind of easy to use from a more kind of presentation proposal, but they consist of the persons or the kind of groups of people and their interactions and relationships to each other, and are visualized here, as you can see, using directed graphs with numbered kind of interactions to present some form of an abstract sequence. So this is a very simple one, just showing you the two meta model elements, the actors and the interaction elements. But an example of cooperation model here is one that we could use maybe to show the interactions that we have between an insurance broker, the insurance provider and the customer, or we could use it for the representation of the business model, like the kind of urban bike rental company or an urban car rental companies such as Car2Go. But the focus of the cooperation model presentation is on the exchange of information between either internal or external actors or partners. So it doesn't have to be everybody within your organization. You can also visualize any external communication. Activities without any information exchange, we can use the double arrows to represent that, and any alternatives or alternative activities can be indexed using letters A, B, C, and so on. But again, let's take a look at a more kind of concrete example. So here is an example from a financial services project which related to the internal standardization of an application that was being used across several organizational units. The cooperation model was used rather than a process map in this case. So here we have the relationships between the insurer and the customer before the interaction moves on to the service center, before finally ending up in internal processing, who need to carry out the administration that is required before completing the loop here back to the customer at the beginning. So as a result of using this approach, we can provide a narrative description on the model, which is added here directly on the model itself. In this case, we've documented information flows between the various actors, but it would also be possible to visualize maybe cash flows or the movement of goods through the cooperation model. And a byproduct here of this form of representation, as already shown here, is the kind of grouping or the potential grouping, which could be the basis for a future process landscape development, as we would have all of the phases already documented here in the cooperation model. And we can also capture notes on such a collaborative model to basically facilitate the communication between the modelers involved in documenting the cooperation model, and also just to make sure the readers and everybody is on the same page when it comes to understanding what is being described in the cooperation model. So ultimately, the cooperation model also allows us to highlight individual points that need to be considered, and we can then link them to more concrete actions or initiatives. So any kind of places where you may find out that there's some issues. So in our example here, we could maybe see that the insurance system doesn't set a workflow status once the data entry step is complete, or that the customer themselves are unable to find out the status of their order independently. So they need to get in contact. They can't just go online and find out what the current status is, or that there's no analysis possible in the number of kind of quality assurance loops that we have. So things like this can be then identified on the cooperation model. We can then set that we have an action required at a certain stage, give the action required an ID. So we're really looking to support the change management process here to identify the weak points and then add a description as a need for action, but also link it to the defined action and initiative management. So you can then close the loop in terms of improving the cooperation model as well. But everything is documented directly here in the cooperation model based on what you can record for the objects that we have here. Finally, we'd like to take a quick look at the typical process maps or process landscapes. So the process maps are an approach to structure your individual processes in either phases, as we saw in the cooperation model, or by business area, or based on certain topics. And they really provide just a kind of a bird's eye view of the processes of an organization. But they've been developed really focusing on the structure, as it's a very important element for organizing the process environment of any company. For example, if you are trying to map an end-to-end process, or you're just mapping by department or by process groups. But process maps really, from an organizational perspective, should be seen as more than just a structuring approach. The structuring is important because basically the structure will represent and it'll somehow determine the way processes are kind of thought about or considered positively or negatively within the organization. So it's really a kind of an entry point for everybody, so it needs to be structured in a way that kind of helps to have a positive approach to processes within your organization. Classic examples of process maps are usually structured according to management, core, and support processes. As I said, it's mostly an entry point into the process architecture for a company, for all readers or all employees, and therefore kind of molds or determines the kind of, basically the thinking of the employees in the organization, especially towards the processes. And the goal is to have the process architecture centrally available to really try and kind of have an influence on the corporate culture and direction of the company, as well as trying to harmonize processes across all of the process areas that you have. It's really important to develop kind of an intuitive structure as well when it comes to defining your process map. For example, on the kind of second level of your hierarchy, you should try and make the detailing of the core processes more obvious using various determinants which have been proven useful in the past. So here in our sample processes from a financial institution, we have grouped our processes by product group as offered by the bank or by the product's life cycle. So whether it's new business or more from an operational perspective here, we can just group the processes, so it makes it more intuitive for the reader to find where it is their processes lie within the process architecture. So coming from an entry point at the first level, being able to drill down into your process area and then really finding the process that you have based on their characteristics, or here we've got life cycle and product groups as the determinants to group the product processes together. But you can find out more about this topic by taking a look at one of our previous on-demand webinars, which is called Getting Started with BPM, where we go into more details of how to actually structure such a process architecture. So just to recap then on what we have covered in today's session, customer journeys, cooperation models and process maps have different uses and individual benefits depending on your scenario. The customer journey mapping allows you to identify the activities from more from the customer's perspective, to document the interaction points between customers and companies, to analyze either the potential pain points or where you can really see some benefits from a positive customer experience already. The benefits of customer journey mapping are the identification of the strengths and the USPs, as well as the problem areas that we can then address with initiatives to be then defined and executed, but they're more targeted initiatives because you've already assessed the pain points from your customer's perspective. Cooperation models detail and understand the interactions between the internal and external actors, allowing you to kind of detect and derive your process phases based on the interactions that are there. As a result, you can recognize the essential interaction types or real kind of performance flows. And cooperation models allow more detailed re-engineering with an overview on the process boundaries that have been defined. And they can also provide a high-level end-to-end process view, which I said is a great communication tool for conveying a more complex process in a simplified way. And then lastly, our classic process maps provide structure to your processes from a more company's perspective with clear hierarchical structuring features such as your end-to-end process, so really allowing to detail the process across the multiple levels. And the process maps provide a stable structure to perform analysis on your maturity levels, on continuous improvements, and also in optimization initiatives as well. So The process maps then lead you to the more detailed process flow models at the operational level, where you can then begin to assign both responsibilities and also resources to your processes. Customer journeys and cooperation models are increasingly used for idea creation, analysis, and high-level communication, while the process maps and ultimately your process models have clear advantages in the structuring of your process architecture. So it's just the difference between the various approaches. One is more about idea creation and one is more structure-based from the kind of classic process map approach. So I hope that I've given you a good overview of these modeling and analysis tools for the purposes of strategic process management. I'd now like to pass you back to Maren, who's going to conclude today's session. So thanks again, Maren.
Thank you very much, Tom. Thank you very much. So in conclusion, we'll cover some general outro material. If you're interested in learning more in the development, analysis, optimization, more strategic process maps, more cooperation models, customer journeys, etc., as part of your business process management, you can talk to your account manager. You can also find, as Tom previously mentioned, our on-demand webinar, Getting Started with BPM, at the link listed below. And we also have a live webinar, which I will talk about a little bit later, that's coming up about digital transformation. So here are a few webinars and events that will be coming up soon. First, we have some thematic on-demand webinars that are readily available, like quality management and BPM, getting started with BPM, cross-domain transparency, optimizing business processes, and of course measure the quality of your process management initiatives through maturity levels and KPIs. We also have a library of already recorded on-demand webinars and some other articles that are worth checking out on our website. So for the webinars and events that are live that will be coming up soon, we have the Adonis NP55 Unboxed, which is our newest version of Adonis. It has some very exciting new features. That's coming out on May 10th. And then on the 24th of May, we have a webinar on the digital advantage, how to manage digital transformation with BPM and enterprise architecture. Of course, Adonis NP, you can get your free trial with us if you like. That is also available on our website at www.boc-group.com/Adonis. It's the next generation business process management. The free trial has BPM collaboration with up to 3 colleagues. You get the full Adonis NP Starter Edition functionality and 30-day free access. If you have any questions, please submit them to us through the panel on the right. We would be more than happy to answer them afterward. We unfortunately do not have time to answer them live, but all the same look forward to receiving them from you. Well then, I would like to close today's webinar at this time. As again, for the remaining open questions, we will gladly answer them afterward. I'm quite happy to see that most of you joined us today, and I hope that we could meet your expectations. Please do not forget to subscribe to our newsletter to stay informed about the free events that we have and other interesting news. It gives us great pleasure to receive your feedback on webinars in general, which is why you will be receiving an email from us in the coming days asking you for your opinion on our performance. On behalf of Tom and I, we wish you all a very pleasant day and see you next time.